Foxglove Hall sat at the edge of the quiet village, of which hollow like a well, kept secret. The manor was not grand in the loud, ostentatious sense that some country houses favoured, but it possessed a quieter sort of splendour, one of symmetry, ivy, framed windows, polished brass knockers, and a rose garden that seemed to bloom according to its own traditions rather than the seasons. Even in winter the frost-kissed hedges were clipped into obedience, and the gravel drive swept in a courteous curve up to the oak, panelled doors. It was the sort of house that seemed to expect visitors for tea, but only the polite ones. Christmas was approaching, and Foxglove Hall wore the season tastefully. No gaudy displays, no clanging bells, no electric reindeer in the garden. Instead, a single noble fir tree stood in the entrance foyer, adorned with glass baubles the colour of mulled wine and winter berries, delicate ribbons of silver, and candles that were never lit, but whose mere presence suggested warmth. A garland of fresh holly traced the banister of the main staircase, its berries plump and red, as though recently fed village gossip. Inside, the hall smelled of cinnamon, beeswax, old books, and a faint trace of mystery, though no one could yet identify the source of that last ingredient. Among the earliest arrivals for the holiday gathering was Miss Jane Marple, invited by her old friend Mrs. Dolly Merriweather, the hall's current custodian of hospitality. Miss Marple, bundled in a wool coat the colour of winter smoke and a neatly tied scarf, stepped from the motor-car with a quiet observational alertness that would have made a lesser mystery uncomfortable. "Such a pretty place, isn't it?" said Mrs. Merriweather, patting snowflakes from her gloves. "Yes, my dear," Miss Marple replied, eyes travelling the windows, the roof-line, the garden gate, the footprints by the side path that led nowhere important, or so one might think. "Very pretty, the sort of place where nothing dreadful ever happens, which is precisely why dreadful things often do." Mrs. Merriweather chuckled nervously. "Oh, Jane, always seeing puzzles in the shrubbery. The shrubbery often deserves it," said Miss Marple gently. The guest list for the Christmas stay was small but socially dense, the way village tea-cakes were small but calorically ambitious. First, there was Sir Reginald Foxglove, the hall's original owner, recently widowed, retired, and determined to remain a pillar of village dignity, even if dignity had begun to require structural support. Sir Reginald was a man of 73, with a moustache that believed it still governed the empire, steel, grey hair, and a habit of standing too close to the hearth, as though negotiating territorial rights. Then came his nephew and presumed heir, Edmund Foxglove, an architectural historian who appreciated old buildings more than new relatives. He was in his late 30s, tall, earnest, and possessed of a face that suggested morality had been a childhood hobby. Yet hobbies could be abandoned, and which Hollow privately wondered whether Edmund had misplaced his somewhere near adolescence. Dr. Beatrice Crane, the village physician, was also staying at the hall, not because she enjoyed fox hunting aristocrats, but because she enjoyed medical curiosity, and Sir Reginald's chronic ailments provided endless fieldwork. She was precise, capable, and wore wire-rimmed spectacles that doubled as punctuation marks for her sentences. There was Clara Finch, the hall's house secretary, whose duties included correspondence, scheduling, estate finances, and the emotional management of everyone else's reputations. Clara was efficient, discreet, and carried notebooks the way other women carried handbags, with intent. The final long-term guest was Mr. Horace Plum, a self-proclaimed horticultural expert and organizer of the village's annual Christmas flower exhibition. Horace was round, rosy, cheeked, and possessed of a booming enthusiasm for botany, seasonal arrangements, and being listened to, if plants could roll their eyes, his begonias would have filed a complaint. And lastly, arriving on the afternoon of 23rd December like a gust of theatrical controversy, was Vivian Hartwell, a former West End actress with a voice trained to reach balconies even when speaking to teacups. She was elegant, self-aware, glitteringly enigmatic, and quite possibly hiding a past that could fill 2 acts and an interval. The inciting incident did not wait long. On Christmas Eve morning, the Hall's butler, Mr. Thatcham, discovered Sir Reginald collapsed at the edge of the rose garden, face down in snow, cane discarded, and dignity thoroughly unsettled. Gasps rippled through the household like an overturned tea-tray. "Call Dr. Crane at once," cried Clara Finch, already kneeling beside him. Dr. Crane arrived briskly, medical bag in hand. She checked his pulse, lifted an eyelid, examined his fingertips, and then delivered the verdict that altered the temperature of the entire story. "Sir Reginald is alive," she said, "but this was no garden mishap. Someone has poisoned him." The word poisoned landed with all the soft devastation of a dropped pearl earring. Edmund turned pale. Who would do such a thing? Uncle Reginald is, well, difficult, yes, but murderously so. "Murder often prefers the difficult," said Miss Marple mildly, stepping closer. "Horace Plum fanned himself, but at Christmas, in a rose garden, in winter, poisoning a man outdoors is quite mad. Madness, Mr. Plum," said Vivian Hartwell silkily, "is rarely so random as you imagine." Miss Marple said nothing at first. She merely studied the footprints in the snow, the cane's position, the angle of collapse, the faint mark of disturbed petals beneath frost, and the silence that followed every statement too heavy for comfort. And then she observed something small, something festive, a delicate teacup, patterned with foxglove blossoms, half buried in snow near Sir Reginald's left hand. She crouched, brushing it clean. Foxglove, a plant both beautiful and deadly. How very symbolic for Christmas at Foxglove Hall. Miss Marple began her inquiries not with drama, but with tea. It was her considered belief that truth was more likely to be stirred than shouted. The drawing-room provided the perfect laboratory for her methods. Chintz armchairs, a low winter sun filtering through leaded glass, a tray of shortbread, and a teapot that whistled nothing but innocence. The suspects assembled, each privately certain they were being terribly unfairly suspected, and each publicly determined to prove it. Miss Marple sat knitting. The needles clicked like quiet interrogation. Dr. Crane stood by the mantelpiece, clinical eyes sweeping the room. Clara Finch remained poised with her notebook open. Edmund leaned forward with academic seriousness. Horace Plum attempted to look like a man whose interest in plants had never included lethal side effects. Vivian Hartwell reclined elegantly, fully aware that suspicion suited her better than clarity. "Let us begin simply," said Miss Marple, without pausing her knitting. "Who last served Sir Reginald tea?" Mr. Thatcham cleared his throat. "That would be me, miss. He took his morning cup at 8 a.m. as always, a splash of milk, no sugar. He then took a short walk in the garden before luncheon." "And the cup you served him in?" she asked. "The foxglove set, ma'am, the same he's used for 20 years. A family heirloom set white china hand, painted foxglove pattern, gold rim." Miss Marple glanced at the cleaned cup now sitting on the table before her. "This one?" Mr. Thatcham blinked. "Yes, that's it precisely." She nodded. "Then the poison was administered after 8 a.m. in that very cup, out of doors. Curious, isn't it, that he carried a teacup into a frozen rose garden? Sir Reginald does not strike me as a whimsical man. Vivian Hartwell lifted an eyebrow. Unless someone asked him to meet them there. Quite, said Miss Marple. Now then, did anyone ask him to meet them there? Silence thickened. Edmund looked uncomfortable. I did speak with him last night about estate matters, but nothing about gardens or teacups. Clara Finch said crisply, Sir Reginald received several letters yesterday, one from a solicitor, one anonymous note, and an invitation to the Village Flower Exhibition Committee meeting. Anonymous note, repeated Miss Marple. Yes, it said only, I know what you did. Meet me where the foxgloves sleep. Horace scoffed. Nonsense. Foxgloves sleep in winter. Everyone knows that. They do, said Miss Marple, which suggests the author expected Sir Reginald to understand the metaphor. Dr. Crane adjusted her spectacles. Do you have the note? Clara produced it from her folder, already placed in evidence. Miss Marple read it carefully. The handwriting was disguised, angular, deliberate. Who has grievances against Sir Reginald? Vivian smiled faintly. Half the village, but few would admit it on a teapot. Horace attempted a chuckle. I once had a disagreement with him about prize chrysanthemums. He favoured red. I favoured yellow. We nearly had words. You nearly have words about everything, Horace, said Dr. Crane dryly. Only botanical matters. He protested. Miss Marple's mind flicked through possibilities like index cards of village behaviour. Inheritance tensions, old scandals, someone with access, someone with motive, someone theatrical enough to stage symbolism, someone practical enough to procure poison. She interviewed them one by one. Edmund Foxglove had motive via inheritance, but lacked opportunistic subtlety. His answers were earnest, perhaps too earnest. He spoke about architecture, lineage, preservation. Yet preservation applied only to buildings, not people. Dr. Beatrice Crane had access to medical substances, but doctors preferred saving lives, not staging rows, garden theatrics. Still, doctors also knew poison symptoms. Useful knowledge could be misused. Clara Finch handled letters, appointments, access to Sir Reginald's schedule, even his moods. Efficiency could mask ambition. Ambition could mask opportunity. Horace Plum loved foxgloves, but did he love them lethally? His exuberance felt genuine, but exuberant people often buried sharp intentions beneath floral enthusiasm, and Vivian Hartwell, the theatrical wild card, an actress knew staging, symbolism, misdirection. She also knew secrets, and secrets sometimes killed more quietly than daggers. Miss Marple noted everything, especially what was not said, because poison was rarely loud, but motives often whispered. And this house, pretty as it was, whispered fluently. The second clue arrived wrapped not in ribbon, but circumstance. That evening, during carols in the village church, the choir halted mid-verse when the organist, Mr. Pritchard, collapsed dramatically. Not dead, merely unconscious, but notably clutching a sprig of foxglove pinned to his coat. Foxglove again. The village now had not one victim, but a motif. Miss Marple attended church interviews with her usual mildness. Did anyone give Mr. Pritchard the foxglove sprig? She asked the choir. The soprano, Mrs. Albright, sniffed. Horace Plum was handing them out as symbols for the exhibition committee. Horace, summoned, spluttered indignantly. Decorative symbolism, not botanical warfare. Yet someone is using foxgloves for precisely that, said Miss Marple. A twist emerged. Sir Reginald once chaired the exhibition committee before resigning in disgrace. A Christmas scandal, long buried, involving misreported funds, forged signatures, and a missing 5, earmarked for greenhouse renovations. The culprit was never found. Red herrings scattered like petals. The solicitor's letter confirmed inheritance adjustments. The anonymous note suggested blackmail. The foxglove pattern suggested symbolism, but symbolism could be a decoy as well as a signature. Another suspect appeared, Martha Grimsby, village florist, bitter that Sir Reginald once discredited her prizes. But Martha lacked poison access, and her bitterness was public, not subtle. Miss Marple refined the suspect pool back to the hall. Because theatrical clues always originated close to the stage, and Foxglove Hall was unquestionably a stage, Miss Marple found the truth in the tea rituals. Sir Reginald never carried tea into gardens. Unless tea was not his reason for going. The phrase "where the foxgloves sleep" referred to the winter, locked greenhouse where foxgloves were stored for exhibition use. She inspected it, and found residue in an unused teapot, digitalis extract, medically refined foxglove toxin. Only one person could both access digitalis extract and understand exhibition metaphors. Only one person managed committee letters. Only one person knew the scandal fund's timeline. Only one person staged a second collapse to reinforce symbolism. Clara Finch. She forged committee signatures years ago, stole the 5 zeros, and returned to manage the estate where evidence was easiest to control. She poisoned Sir Reginald to silence exposure, then staged Mr. Pritchard's collapse to disguise singular intent as seasonal theatrics. The snowfall began again just after midnight on Christmas Day, as though which hollow itself wished to cloak the past few hours in fresh powder and offer the village a clean beginning. The flakes drifted soundlessly across the grounds of Foxglove Hall, settling upon roof tiles, statues, and secrets alike. Inside the manor, however, silence had acquired a different quality, tense, anticipatory, the sort of hush that comes just before the truth speaks its piece. Miss Jane Marple had retired to her guest-room some hours earlier, ostensibly to sleep. Yet, much like the village cats who appeared to doze while absorbing every conversation in the vicinity, Miss Marple's rest was of the contemplative variety. She sat by the window, her knitting needles stilled, the half-finished scarf draped across her lap like an unasked question. The mystery, she felt, had reached the point where intuition must cease wandering and finally arrive. Her mind traced the sequence of events as delicately as one might arrange winter blooms for exhibition. Sir Reginald's collapse, the teacup left like a calling card in the snow, the anonymous note, the organist's theatrical fainting, the foxglove sprigs distributed with enthusiastic innocence, and beneath it all, the old committee scandal, dormant but not forgotten. Every piece appeared charmingly disconnected on the surface, but charm, Miss Marple knew, was often the velvet glove concealing the iron fist of intent. She murmured to herself, if one wishes to hide a motive, one merely buries it beneath a more dramatic one. At precisely 7:30 a.m. she rose. Christmas at the Hall would continue whether murder had attempted to interrupt it or not, and the killer, she suspected, believed they had succeeded in dissolving into the theatrics of seasonal chaos. But murderers often underestimated the power of a quiet observer with a sharper memory than the sharpest shears in Horace Plum's greenhouse. Downstairs, the manor was already stirring. The servants moved about preparing the Christmas breakfast with admirable professionalism, though each wore expressions that suggested curiosity simmering just beneath the surface of propriety. Christmas or not, this was a village accustomed to puzzles, and no amount of holly garlands could prevent speculation from blooming. Mrs. Dolly Merriweather presided over the dining-room with slightly forced cheer. A long table gleamed with polished silver, cranberry preserves, buttered toast, kedgeree, and smoked kippers. A festive centrepiece of winter flowers, ironically devoid of foxglove, sat proudly at the middle. Sir Reginald, pale but very much alive, was seated near the head of the table, wrapped in a tartan dressing-gown, fortified by a shawl, a roaring fire, and a visible determination to appear unaffected. "I assure you," Sir Reginald declared, clearing his throat, "a bit of bad tea won't keep a foxglove from his breakfast." Miss Marple sat down beside him and poured herself a modest cup from the new breakfast service. "Quite right, Sir Reginald, though it does seem tea has been rather eventful lately, hasn't it? Sir Reginald harumphed. Tea should mind its business. People should too," said Miss Marple, almost too gently. Edmund Foxglove entered moments later, combing his hair back with hurried strokes, looking as though the night had offered little rest and many thoughts. "Good morning, Aunt Jane," he said, calling her aunt as an affectionate courtesy rather than a genealogical fact. "I trust you slept better than the rest of us." "One rarely sleeps well when motives are pacing the corridors," she replied. He gave her a small, humorless smile. "I dare say motives are still abed." "I doubt it," said Miss Marple. Horace Plum arrived next, rosy cheeked, waving a napkin like a surrender flag. "I've examined every plant in the greenhouse," he announced proudly. "Not a single one looks guilty. That is fortunate for the plants," said Dr. Beatrice Crane, who entered behind him, already removing her gloves and placing them neatly beside her plate. "But people, Horace, we must examine the people. Examine away," he said, "though I suspect the teapot did it and fled." Miss Marple sipped tea, eyes lowered. "Teapots don't write blackmail notes, Mr. Plum." Vivian Hartwell glided in last, wrapped in elegance and ambiguity. Even without stage lighting, she seemed spotlight, aware. "I dreamt of foxgloves last night," she said. Odd, poisonous little dreams. Perhaps the subconscious enjoys a theme. The subconscious may enjoy themes, Miss Marple observed, but murderers enjoy them more. Vivian smiled thinly. "And who, pray, enjoys murder?" "No one sensible," said Miss Marple, "which narrows our list considerably." The meal proceeded with uneasy civility. Kippers were consumed, toast buttered, and preserves spread, though conversation limped like Sir Reginald's abandoned cane. No one wished to speak too freely, for the subject in everyone's mind was neither breakfast nor the weather, but the puzzle now sitting quietly among them, knitting metaphors out of wool. When the plates were cleared and the servants discreetly withdrew, Miss Marple placed her knitting aside, folded her hands, and delivered the sort of mild statement that felt far less mild once heard. "Shall we take a walk?" she asked. Sir Reginald blinked. "In the snow after yesterday?" "In the snow," she said, rising, "because snow preserves what people wish to erase." The group exchanged glances. Clara Finch was absent. That absence, Miss Marple felt, was not coincidence. The side path to the greenhouse was narrow and white, bordered by hedges now thick with frost. The winter air smelled clean, but cleanliness could be misleading. Miss Marple walked slowly, but her mind walked quickly. When they reached the greenhouse door, she paused. The lock had been tampered with recently, not broken, merely persuaded. Inside, rows of dormant plants stood in pots labelled for the Christmas Exhibition Committee. Hydrangeas, winter roses, holly arrangements, and poinsettias waited like actors in a silent play. But at the far end stood a single display table with 6 potted foxgloves, each tagged for decorative purposes. The plants were beautiful even in hibernation, all stems bell-shaped blossoms frozen into expectation rather than bloom. "The foxgloves sleep here," Miss Marple said softly. Edmund frowned, "But what of it, Aunt Jane? What of it indeed?" she echoed, and stepped inside. There, on the display table, lay a ledger book belonging to the exhibition committee, open to a page dated 5 years earlier. A list of greenhouse renovation expenses, committee approvals, and the notation of a 5-0 allocation. But the signature approving release of funds was inked in a different hand from the rest, carefully written but familiar. Dr. Crane leaned closer. "That handwriting?" "Yes," said Miss Marple, "the same hand that wrote Sir Reginald's estate memos." "And?" asked Vivian. "And," said Miss Marple, turning, "also the same hand that managed committee correspondence, a hand efficient enough to organize letters, but ambitious enough to rewrite histories." Horace blinked dramatically. "Are you accusing the ledger?" "I'm accusing the person who believed a ledger could be used as a grave," she said. Footsteps crunched in the snow outside, slow, measured, purposeful. The greenhouse door opened. Clara Finch stood framed by falling snow, coat immaculate, expression composed, hands gloved in dark wool. Her eyes flicked first to the group, then to the ledger, and lastly to Miss Marple, lingering there a moment too long. "Christmas breakfast ran late," she said calmly. "I assumed you'd still be at the table." "Christmas breakfast, Miss Finch," said Miss Marple, "is rarely held in a locked greenhouse." Clara exhaled, not a sigh. "A full stop." Dr. Crane stepped forward. "Clara, we need answers." "You need nothing of the sort," Clara said crisply, "and if you did, you've already invented them, haven't you?" Miss Marple folded her hands behind her. "Only the truthful ones. It saves time." Edmund looked stunned. "Clara, poison, blackmail notes, committee fraud, you—" Clara gave him a brief ironic smile. "Architecture was never your strong subject, Edmund. People, however, are yours. Yet you never built a foundation beneath them, did you?" He swallowed hard. Miss Marple spoke again. "You had access to digitalis extract through old medical channels. You understood the metaphor in the note. You managed committee correspondence. And you knew Sir Reginald was preparing to quietly reopen inquiries into the missing funds." Clara said nothing, "which means," Miss Marple continued, "you also knew he would understand exactly where to meet the blackmailer, because the blackmailer was not anonymous at all. It was personal and old." Vivian murmured, "The best disguises are not masks, but mirrors." "Oh, well said, my dear," replied Miss Marple. Clara finally spoke. "If I wished to kill him, I would have succeeded." "You wished to silence him," said Miss Marple, "not kill him outright. Silence, after all, is far easier to control than death. A dead man raises inquiries. A silenced one raises only sympathy." Sir Reginald leaned on the table, jaw tight. "And the sprigs given at the church." "A mislead," said Miss Marple, before Clara could reply. "If suspicion were a flower, it blooms fastest when everyone believes it was planted by someone else." Clara gave a humourless laugh. "I distributed nothing. Horace Plum did, and I knew you would suspect the plants long before the people." Horace flushed. "I only wished to make the exhibition memorable." "It was memorable enough without attempted murder," said Dr. Crane. Miss Marple turned toward Clara. "You stole the 5-0 by forging committee approvals. You hid the evidence in plain sight by becoming the estate's secretary, where no one would question a woman whose job it was to manage everyone else's papers. And when Sir Reginald received the solicitor's letter suggesting a renewed audit, you feared the scandal would finally speak your name aloud." Clara removed one glove, slowly, a deliberate gesture like a curtain lifting. "I feared nothing," she said, "except dull endings." "Then you should never have chosen murder," said Miss Marple. "Murder is never dull, but its endings are terribly predictable." The truth always arrives for breakfast, even when the suspects don't. Clara stared at her, the sort of stare that admitted defeat without pronunciation. "And the poison in the teacup?" Edmund asked weakly. "You met him outdoors under pretext of blackmail," said Miss Marple. "You brought the heirloom cup, not the tea. The cup was the summons, the tea was the trap." Sir Reginald looked thunderous. "Tea should mind its business. The business," said Miss Marple, "was yours, Sir Reginald, and hers." Clara nodded once. "I intended no murder, only leverage, but he threatened to expose me anyway. So you escalated from blackmail to silence," Miss Marple concluded, "and nearly misled the entire household into suspecting theatrics, inheritance, and begonias." Horace muttered, "My begonias resent the accusation." "They are welcome to testify later," said Miss Marple. Dr. Crane stepped forward. "Clara Finch, I must ask you plainly. Did you administer digitalis extract to Sir Reginald Foxglove in the rose garden between 8 and 9 a.m. yesterday?" Clara met her gaze. "Yes." The confession dropped into the greenhouse air like a single red bauble falling from a tree. No sound, only consequence. The aftermath unfolded with orderly calm, the sort of calm that Miss Marple privately considered the natural antidote to human disorder. The local authorities were summoned discreetly, because scandal enjoyed attention, and attention, Miss Marple felt, should not be rewarded unless earned by justice rather than theatrics. Statements were taken, snow continued falling, and Clara was escorted away with professional briskness, almost as though still managing someone's timetable. The funds were recovered from an offshore investment account under Clara's name. The committee scandal was officially closed. Sir Reginald's reputation was polished back into dignity, though everyone privately agreed it had acquired a few new scratches. Christmas dinner at Foxglove Hall proceeded that evening at precisely the appointed hour of 6 p.m., organised by Mrs. Merryweather, who insisted upon a menu fortified by tradition, reassurance, and roast goose. The table gleamed once more, now free of poisoned heirlooms and fraudulent ledgers. Winter roses replaced foxglove sprigs. Candles were finally lit. The tree in the foyer, having borne silent witness to attempted murder and metaphorical horticulture, was now permitted its seasonal triumph. Miss Marple sat beside Sir Reginald again, this time with knitting needles resumed and a small glass of sherry warming her hand. "You saved my life, Jane," Sir Reginald said gruffly, "even if you do have a murderous imagination about shrubbery." "My imagination is rarely murderous," she replied. "Only observational." Edmund looked chastened but thoughtful. "I never suspected Clara. She was always so efficient, so ordinary. Ordinary people," said Miss Marple, "are often the least examined, and therefore the most interesting when mischief blooms." Vivian raised her glass. To quiet observers, sharper than greenhouse shears, Horace lifted his to exhibitions that confined themselves to flowers rather than felonies, and to tea, added Sir Reginald, that finally minds its business. Miss Marple smiled. "Tea, Sir Reginald, always minds the truth. It is people who often don't." The fire crackled, the candles glowed. Outside, snow preserved nothing now except Christmas itself, and the village of Witch Hollow, having survived a seasonal scandal, a poisoned metaphor, and a murderer who nearly escaped beneath symbolism, restored itself to the pleasant gossip of winter festivities. Miss Marple resumed her scarf, because puzzles were solved, but winters were long, and deduction, like knitting, never truly ended, only paused between patterns.